Hi, this is the fourth video in my Minecraft lore series, The Minecraft Timeline, an accumulation of many different lore theories in an organized timeline. And as I'm sure you've guessed from the title of this video, we'll be diving into the ancient builder's adventure across the fiery Nether dimension. But before they even started to explore the Nether, the ancient builders would have had to actually build the portal. The problem isn't that the builders can't make the portal, no, they have the means to do that. The problem is about how they even know that the portal like the Nether portal works. There's nothing that suggests that this would be the case. So how do they know what they needed to do? My mind immediately goes to the idea of trial and error. Maybe they just kept trying to make portals until they got it? But the odds of them actually getting it right by pure guesswork is extremely low. They didn't have a reason to believe there were other dimensions. You wouldn't try to make a portal to something if you've never even heard of that something before. So if it wasn't guesswork, then there must have been an external source that guided them, or something that would lead the ancient builders to think that a portal like this would work. I can't come up with any overworld structures besides the portals themselves that indicate the Nether's existence. The hosts could be likely contributors to the knowledge of another dimension. They have a direct connection to the flames of creation, assisted in the creation of the overworld themselves, and also may have given prisonry to the builders. If I had to choose a host that would have the most connection to Nether, it would be Ender. As a mysterious fourth host that I've mentioned in my very first video on this channel, Ender created the End, a corrupted, barren dimension, and seemingly warped bit of the Nether. And if you look at the colors of the Enderman, you see the same black and purple colors that the Nether portal shares. This may be a coincidence, but the iconic purple eyes of the Enderman and the dragon, as well as the obsidian platform and pillars of the main end island, although those are probably man-made, do seem odd just to be a coincidence in game design. Now, the Nether doesn't share a direct connection to the End, because why would it? Rather, I believe that both dimensions have a connection to the Void, which is represented by black and purple. I've mentioned that obsidian is a very magical block, giving the ability to enchant items or apply effects via the enchanting table or beacon, and this is just another example of its power. Where it got its power from, I don't know for sure, but my best guess would be Ender because of its coloration. Then again, its colors are directly inspired by real-life obsidian, so who knows. Obsidian is naturally occurring in the overworld, so it's always possible that Ender had nothing to do with it. Regardless, obsidian does indeed seem to be connected to the void, or some sort of void-like pocket dimension, and therefore the Nether, the closest dimension to the overworld. I don't know why the host introduced the builders to the Nether, but it's a better explanation than trial and error. Or, more likely, the host merely informed the builders of the Nether's existence, and the builders figured obsidian could act as a gateway to the Nether, as it is a combination of lava, symbolic of the Nether, and water, symbolic of the overworld. In a world full of gods, symbolism doesn't seem too out there. But now that we've sort of covered how the builders may have constructed the portal, let's finally venture into the Nether. And the first thing the ancient builders did was, obviously, gather resources. They found the basalt and blackstone from the basalt deltas especially useful for infrastructure, which brings us to bastions. There are 4 different designs the ancients built: treasure bastions used to store various loot, housing bastions used as homes, bridge bastions used simply for pathways and shelter, and stable bastions used to store and breed hoglins for food. These buildings were, simply put, attempts to live and populate the Nether for some of its unique resources. This would have been fairly difficult considering the harsh, extremely hot lava and climate. Speaking of the lava, that was a real problem. They could enchant their current armor with fire protection, but it was insufficient. Regular diamond armor wouldn't cut it. The bastions were cool, but were expensive and weren't portable, making them an undesirable long-term protection strategy. So what do? They created a new, stronger armor: Netherite. Netherite was a synthetic resource created by the builders that could upgrade their armor, and, importantly, wouldn't burn in lava. It was made using gold, a very common ore found in the Nether, and ancient debris. Ancient debris was unique, as it was the main reason why tools had more durability and efficiency and whatnot, and why it wouldn't burn in lava. Nobody's totally sure what ancient debris is, but most theorize that it is made up of some sort of dead material. I think that it could just be some metal invented by the builders, hence the name scraps and debris, and we'll never know what it is. But there wouldn't be a good reason for it to be scattered about the Nether then, so dead matter it is. Using templates, the ancient builders could combine netherite ingots with diamond to make their most powerful gear even more powerful. These netherite sets would become quite popular in the Nether, allowing the builders to thrive and construct the bastions in peace. And you'll notice that in those bastions, you'll find hoglins and piglins. Those are pigs, but how do they get there? Now, you could say that it's mere coincidence that the piglins exist in the Nether and the regular pigs exist in the overworld. You might even say that it makes sense, considering both dimensions were created by the flames of creation and or are possibly different versions of a similar dimension. However, if you look at the situation more closely, you'll realize that they are almost certainly directly connected. Pigs that are struck by lightning turn into zombified piglins, and piglins turn into zombified piglins when they visit the overworld. Both the Nether and lightning are very hot and maybe share other conditions, so pigs, who seem to be extra susceptible to sudden mutation, transformed into bipedal monsters. The ancients brought the pigs to their bastions as a food source. Due to the strange climate, some turned into piglins while others turned into hoglins. The hoglins were pretty useful. They were dangerous and hostile, but nonetheless they provided a good source of food and even leather. Then there were the piglins. When the builders were making netherite, they had to mine a lot of gold, and since netherite was pretty rare and valuable, the builders who didn't go out and fight likely wore gold more often. This meant that the piglins saw the builders wear gold and thought it was valuable, or maybe they just used it because they like shiny things. They may have mined them themselves, which could mean the builders used them for mining expeditions. Over time, the piglins would have gotten used to wearing gold, and because of their poor recognition skills, they just saw anybody who wore gold as one of them. Well, some had better perception and were a bit more brutish and hostile to anyone who they thought were stealing their loot. Eventually, the piglins almost completely took over the bastions, driving the ancient builders out. Some hoglins also escaped, but remained the prey of piglins, especially when they were hunting. Both mobs would go on to populate the Nether. Another mob that is present throughout the Nether are ghasts. They were once thought to be ghosts made up of suffering spirits, specifically the ones found in soul sand, because of their floaty behavior, ghoulish appearance, and even their name. However, in light of recent evidence, they do not seem like ghosts at all. They are officially not classified as undead. They can grow, seem to have gills, can dry up, and more. The name ghast may have been coined by an ancient builder who did think of them as ghasts at the time. But the ghasts we see suffering in the Nether are probably not how ghasts have always been. Some of the ghasts who have been stuck in the heat for too long, specifically the babies, have dried up. This implies that ghasts are used to water, as bringing dry ghasts to the overworld and hydrating them will turn them into ghastlings. Feed those snowballs, aka frozen water, and they turn into happy ghasts. The Nether, however, does not have any water. So how did they get there? There are two explanations for this. One, the ancient builders brought the happy gas to the Nether for easier building and travel methods, just like they did for pigs, not considering the repercussions. Or two, the Nether used to be a cold, frozen world. This theory is a common one, that the Nether was a lot like the overworld, and the gas always lived there. This explains how basalt, which is formed from ice, got to the Nether, and why the builders thought populating the Nether and bringing mobs there was a good idea, and why we don't see ghasts spawning wild in the overworld. I'm sure you've heard that theory before, which also means that you probably know why the Nether became what it is now, greenhouse gases. Although I'm not sure how the builders figured to burn fossil fuels in the medievalish time that they would have lived, and how those gases affected the entirety of the cave of the Nether dimension, which is my main problem with this theory. Overall though, it can definitely explain some things. The last mob I'd like to talk about is the magma cube. They share a striking resemblance, both in behavior and appearance, to overworld slimes, which is suspicious. If it's not just a coincidence, then my guess would be that the slime accidentally hopped into another portal and fused with the high temperatures and magma. Because of its ability to reproduce asexually, the slime or slimes quickly overtook the dimension, specifically the basalt deltas. But that's the last of the overworld mobs that may or may not have come to the Nether. Other mobs, like the Strider, are native to the Nether. And finally, we need to talk about the Nether fortresses. These structures were used in a similar way that the bastions were used, mainly as shelter from the dangerous Nether and or pathways to cross the lava. If the Nether did used to be cold, then the fortresses were likely built after it became hot, as they mainly incorporate nether brick, which is made from netherrack, which is pretty much just the Nether's stone. However, the crunchy sound it makes indicates that it could have something to do with the fungi we find all over, explaining its reddish appearance, and would mean that it wouldn't have existed before the Nether heated up. Same goes for the bastions with the basalt they use. A very interesting mob you may find among these fortresses are the wither skeletons. We already have regular skeletons spawning in soul sand valleys, areas that once housed sand and now imprison thousands of suffering spirits, dragging you down into the mud with them. The builders' workaround to this was to enchant their boots with soul speed. This enchantment releases trapped souls beneath your feet, therefore making you move faster and making traversing these plains easier. But anyway, the wither skeletons weren't like any other skeleton. Their bones were charred to a crisp, dropping coal upon death. Rather than using bows, the preferred method of combat was melee. Even more interesting was their ability to inflict the withering effect, cursing you with the same destructive disease almost. This brings up questions about whether their current state is due to the lava or some mysterious withering force. Their only safety seems to be amidst the soul sand valleys, where other spirits can protect them from the fire, and the nether fortresses, where the shelter is just enough to protect already withered skeletons. The ancient builders then wanted to create a guardian for their fortress to protect them from mobs or other ancient builders, so they began work with the flames of creation, a gift from the hosts. The easiest way to do this was using the fire from the nether, so the builders created the blazes and spawned them in the fortresses with metallic monster spawners that they had used in previous structures. These golems could launch fireballs at enemies and thrived in the heat of the nether. They were right at home. Unfortunately, they weren't exactly a fan of the ancients, and would end up attacking them when they got a chance. This wasn't too big of a deal, as the builders countered this with armor and blast-proof cobblestone. But the use case for blazes was not lost. The ancient builders inadvertently created a renewable resource, blaze rods. These weren't like any other fiery substance, though. They contained something known as blaze powder, which had the ability to focus the magic of another item and kind of liquefy it. This led to the discovery of brewing, and an important one at that. They learned that many items had useful magic within them that could be drawn out by the power of blaze powder. And so the nether fortresses became a central hub for brewing ingredients, where blazes could be easily farmed for their resources. But that wasn't all the nether had to offer for brewing. The fungi of the crimson forests also proved extremely valuable. A special fungus known as netherwort could be grown on soul sand. Whether or not this has anything to do with the souls, or maybe just the original material before soul sand contained the souls, I don't know. Netherwort would be used in the creation of a base potion, or the awkward potion. And so the bastions would be inhabited by the piglins, and the fortresses would act as a brewery center that contained blazes for blaze powder, as well as netherwort. This would last up until the ancient builders inevitably evacuated the nether, either due to the increasingly poor conditions, or the discovery of the wither, a deadly beast that came about after a builder combined the withering skulls of skeletons and the souls found in soul sand. After whatever happened, the builders cut off connections to the nether and left the mobs they brought behind, but not before bringing back tons of materials, obviously. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video, where I'll talk more about the undead.